Okay, we welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, I interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, I hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest in our show. Today's guest, Gopal MS, is someone whose work I've really admired and learned so much from. As a resident of Bombay, I have looked at his photographs and seen something different in the city I've called home for the last 10 years. A little bit about Gopal before we jump into this conversation. And today we're also going to look at some of his photographs. I will be linking all of Gopal's many digital projects, including Mumbai Paused and Which Main What Cross, and also his digital zines and photo books in the show notes. So anything that he references in this conversation will be in the show notes. So please do follow this conversation up with looking at those additional links. And I also will be linking other conversations he's had on the internet that are also in the show notes. So Gopal MS is an advertising professional. His online project is called Mumbai Paused, and it documents Mumbai's streets and life through photography shared across online platforms and social media using his phone and camera. Till 2009, he also maintained another blog called Which Main What Cross. He shares his work on Instagram and Substack. His work is driven by a daily habit of walking the streets, taking public transport, and sometimes visiting interesting corners of the city to shoot pictures. He also makes digital zines and photo books. I will include links to his work in the show notes. There's another project called Go Hallu that we may also briefly talk about in terms of Gopal's work on that as well. And I'd love to also dive into his career as an advertising professional. So there's so much to unpack here. But Gopal, the first question we always start with, and you've listened to, a bunch of episodes of this podcast with friends, but I've listened to some of your other conversations online, Gopal, but one thing I was always curious about, who was Gopal as a student at school? So can you tell me some stories from your childhood? Where did you grow up? What did you study at school? And what did you like outside school?
Thank you, Abhishek, for inviting me to speak to you and your audience. Yeah, and I am a regular listener of your podcast. Thanks to Substack, actually. I think that is where I found your podcast. Yeah, so I am originally from Bangalore. I'm 50 years plus. So I was born in the early 70s. That's quite a time. And I grew up in Bangalore when it was still a small town. And I grew up in the outskirts in a public sector colony. They call it colony, and which is in a place called Jalahalli, which is outskirts of Bangalore. That would be like the Borivali of those days, I guess, or IC colony of or RCF in what do you call Chembur. It's one of those colonies that I grew up in, and my father used to work in a public sector place, and my mom was a housewife, and my childhood was actually perfect, if you could call it that, because it was, I mean, nothing to complain. It was a great place to grow up. It was like a mini India. Also, Bangalore is very cosmopolitan, cosmopolitan in the sense that you have all kinds of cultures, people, languages, movies, and everything coming together in one place. So, and what I remember about childhood is I had always had company. We were always playing. Then there were lots of libraries, circulating libraries as well as regular libraries. Because so I think my first pictures would probably have come from looking at magazines, and it used to be. And of course, we used to read comics. You had all the those were the days when you had Bahadur and Indrajal comics and all those things which are just come out. Where I mean, that was when they were printed. So it was quite a fascinating time, and of course the usual Asterix and Tintin and all those stuff. And I mean, you got books of all languages, though I read mostly English and not Indian languages. But it was, I think, libraries. A lot of them were there when I look back, and which is something that was the what do you call the internet of those days. And then I also used to like the radio. I think I was always an internet person. I mean, kind of thing. And in those days, the shortwave radio was a very big thing in my life. I used to spend hours every day when I was not playing or something, listening to shortwave radio. It was a connection to the world. So I used to get my news like you get on Twitter now. It used to be Radio Moscow. It was still the Soviet Union then. You had radio from Japanese radio. You had Australian Broadcasting Corporation. You had BBC. Then you tune into all kinds of different whatever is available on shortwave. Some most of which you couldn't even understand. And of course there were Indian radio stations also. Again shortwave. So I used to try and get something that is really far away. And I'm sticking to mostly my influences. Another important thing which looking back and on hindsight was I started reading say when in the 80s, I guess, early 80s. And that was the time there was this magazine boom in India. So you had, of course, you had Illustrated Weekly and some magazines which were already there. But it was also the time that there were like some, like how the equivalent of the internet in 2000 or 99 or around that time or later social media. That was a big thing for my generation because you're of that age because you had all the big magazines coming out at that time and it was a kind of if you go online and you search for nostalgia for those magazines you'll see a lot of people writing about it, so that was a big influence. I think that influenced a lot of things that I do now. And I didn't think of becoming a journalist because it was beyond our imagination at that point of time to even think of jobs like, I mean, everybody was supposed to be an engineer or something like that. So, at least in Bangalore, you never thought of things like that. But yeah, so my early childhood was kind of absorbing information, I guess, and having fun and playing. So, I would call it perfect. Yeah.
Like so many little stories in that, like because I grew up in 1993, Gopal, so I probably only know an India that was liberalized and, I saw only a world. So I'm just curious as someone that's grown up on this side of, that time. And because you didn't have your camera at that time, so if you had to tell someone like me, what was life like in the 80s and 90s in India, like in urban India, in the city that you grew up, whether I think it was primarily Bangalore, right? Like,
Yeah.
how would you paint a picture of that time without photographs? Just using like words and stories. If you could tell me a few anecdotes of, what it was like to be a teenager or like a person in their 20s growing up in that time, because I can't, it's hard for me to imagine a world that is like, for instance, sometimes I talk to my mother and she tells me that there was just one channel and
Yeah.
every Sunday they would watch that show. And for someone that grows up with so much abundance, it's hard to imagine that kind of world. There were only limited products. Now you have this whole, deluge of options in terms of, and you have 15-minute delivery, which I think is so far off from what, was the possibility back then. So it's hard for me to even imagine that sort of world. So if you could tell me some stories of what was life like in India in the 80s and 90s for a young person growing up?
See, fundamentally, it is not different. I see a lot of children in Bombay still enjoying that kind of childhood. Like not the people living in richer parts of the city, but I'm talking about people who live. I mean, most kids, like I live in Navi Mumbai now. So the kids here have a really normal childhood. I mean, no, I wouldn't call it normal. I would similar to what we had, which is playing friends, playing cricket all the time, waking up in the morning. Only thing is the way you communicated with each other changed. Also, a lot of things where what was different was, like you said, there was one TV channel. So TV came in very late. I mean, the initial part of my childhood, television was like probably a few hours in the evening or something like that, and it was black and white. And I still remember the first TV in the neighborhood, the first TV in my place. And even though it was just one channel, like I got to watch Star Trek. I got to watch Carl Sagan, Cosmos. I got to watch a lot of shows that are now. I mean, they would have been behind the time in India, but the quality of programming was curated really well. And of course, you had music and stuff like that. What was missing was what later became what you would remember the MTV and the ZTV music and the serials that run for a really long time and stuff like that. We also had very similar things. You had Hamlo, Bunyad, and a lot of things. Like, for example, I didn't really study Hindi in school, but I learned or understood Hindi because I watched a lot of Doordarshan then. So that is where I learned the language from, for example. So it was a big influence that way. We made good with what we had. I think it was what you would call immersive today, in the sense, and and there were like afternoon there was television, and like there was no television during the day, but for a couple of us there used to be something known as countrywide classroom that used to have lectures by professors from, say, from Pune or from universities in Delhi, like Jamia Millia Islamia, and stuff like that. So we and they were the best people of those days, in the sense. Imagine listening to Jain Narlikar or somebody like that. In the sense, from Pune. I mean, there were influences in our life. You get to watch Carl Sagan on Sunday, and you get to watch on a weekday afternoon. You get to watch Jain Narlikar speaking on television or something like that. So there were lots of things. I'm talking about what I watched. I mean, people would have watched different things. Cricket was very different. Cricket was like any city. Like, for example, if there was a cricket match in town or a test match in, say, a place like Bangalore, the whole city comes to a standstill. In the sense, it was everywhere. Like before a few days before the match, you'll have those flip cards which had action things. Then you would have the kind of the madness that you see about cricket was very different. It was genuine, in the sense. It and also that was the time India had just it was sometimes before and after winning the World Cup. So there was that you would get to see, if you go for a match, you get to see Gavaskar and Kapil Dev and Madan Lal and all these people playing. So it was the same thing, but I think it was at a different pace. That would what I would say. I would say that a lot of children still enjoy that, in the sense, the childhood that we had, it is still there. I think what was different and about plenty was one. There was things like we were behind the Iron Curtain, in the sense, it was not a world where you got all the information. Of course, there were better magazines and newspapers, and you could probably get better news out of the newspaper, because the print journalism was very good. There was no television then. Radio was unreliable. So, like, for example, we got you if you wanted to know about Indian news, which is trustworthy, you would have to tune in to, say, BBC, just to double check the fact. Like, for example, the day Indira Gandhi was assassinated, so the Indian news announced it with much late, whereas BBC announced it much earlier. So people got to know it from other sources and stuff like that. So it was and behind the Iron Curtain was, I think, we were very poor. I mean, parts of India are still as poor, but it is actually quite unimaginable. It would be unimaginable to a lot of people. Like you said, 15 minutes delivery. It is unimaginable in those days. Like, for example, even middle class people used to buy, like, oil, for example, a cooking oil. Something like a cooking oil was always what you call the ration shop. Everybody used to have a ration card, and people used to stand in queues. People still stand in queues. I think that is the greatest thing that our politicians can provide. In those days, it was worse and it was bad, and people didn't have money. In the sense, it was genuinely what you would call the rich people were really few. Middle class would be actually what is today's poor, really poor, and it is kind of, I mean, I think there are more people who live, poor people now than the whole population then who are at that level, in the sense, if we can talk about it. And might be that is why we see 15 minutes delivery, we see all the thing, but a lot of India still lives like how it was in the 80s. Like water. Like, for example, Bangalore had a water problem that people complain about now. It was worse in the 80s. Like, if anybody in Bangalore tells you that the life in Bangalore was better before the IT boom, they're probably not. It's just the good parts that they remember. It's like people in Bombay telling that Bombay had I mean, South Bombay, you show all the old buildings and tell Bombay had such great buildings and stuff like that. You don't see the rest of the city. So it was not, before liberalization was not good at all, if you ask me, from that point of view. But quality of life with what we had, because we didn't know much, or we didn't know better. There are other things like friends, family, the little things I told you about, which I enjoy. Like I said, I had a perfect childhood. Yeah, because my parents I mean, their struggles were there. I mean, now it's like paying your EMIs or rent in Bombay now. You have the same struggles. They went through that too. Might be there with that extra cash. The little things that you buy were more expensive then. Like, you don't drink soft drinks I mean, in the sense, in those days, like how you drink now. I mean, it's a treat. Eating out was a treat. Nobody would eat out before it is. It was a very, very rare thing. In the sense, that is why there were no restaurants and stuff like that. In the sense, I'll give you a very simple example from Bangalore. You go to a Bangalore, you have something known as military hotels that serve non-vegetarian food, which have they talk about the kind of biryanis that they have, and it's rich in ghee and big pieces of chunks of mutton and stuff like that. Say before liberalization, a military hotel was where you would get watery, what do you call, gravy and bones. And the food was of, I mean, it used to be the quality, the taste would have been good, but the richness of the food would have been much, the nutritional value of the food would have been much less, for example. So that shows you the difference in the purchasing power of people, as well as how might be relatively the cost of food has gone down compared to what it was in those days. Also affordability. So it's complicated. Life before 90s.
Yeah, because I think it's so interesting to hear what you're saying, Gopal, because I think we take so many things for granted, but I think it's easy even now. There's a big part of our country, because it's easy for us to speak from a point of privilege, staying in a certain part of India that has access to certain facilities, and we're speaking from a. And I think it's important to acknowledge that privilege as we're having this conversation. To be able to do this remotely in such a context only speaks about that. But because you are in advertising now, Gopal. One thing I was so fascinated by, like I sometimes see these old photos and reels of products in the 80s and 90s. I'm curious about advertising in that time. And you were not an advertising professional then, you were just a young person growing up, right? So what were some of the most popular advertisements that you remember from the 80s and 90s, and were they like video ads? Were they like picture ads? What was advertising like? And because you are someone that saw that transition and then you started creating ads yourself, whether it was copy, I mean, that's primarily your area of expertise, but I'm just curious, what was that world like, or some popular products and ads?
Okay, so in fact, all the ads that you see now as nostalgia were the popular ones. So, like for example, all the brands that you see starting, say like something like Pepsi was the defining when the change happened. So that became like the icon of the transition from what do you call the pre-liberalization. I mean, basically the Berlin Wall fell and the rest is history. So around that time, the late 80s and early was the turning point when television really took off on a mass scale. But before that, there were really popular TV ads, like for example, say Hamara Bajaj, or there were the ads and stuff like that. So and what sticks out to me from those days, from a television point of view, were all the jingles. It was very jingle lit because I think it was a transition from radio to television. So that jingle thing, you hardly hear jingles now in ads because of there are lots of factors like cost and stuff like that. You used to have longer ads then, and you had time to build that. And also, you're watching just one television channel, so whether or not you had no escape. I mean, you put an ad across India and it reaches everybody who could afford it. That was a different thing. But before that, I think in my personal thing, I prefer to write ads. In the sense, I like print, and because so I end up doing a lot of print ads even now. And also, what is now digital ads, a lot of thing is actually closer to poster and print than to videos. In the sense, yeah, videos are fun, but or television commercials are fun. I think in my case, I think it was the ads that I saw in the newspaper, the print ads that made a lot of difference to me. I do not remember anything specific as of now, in the sense because there are so many of them. Like for example, when I was a kid, there used to be a thing called Poppins that used to have like if you pick up any of these old issues of Indrajal comics, on the last page you had in Ram and Sham, I think, who used to sell Poppins, or and there used to be superheroes. There used to even be Amitabh Bachchan and Dharmendra selling something as action hero figures and stuff like that. I remember those really. These are all influences. Uh, I think that is what made me. And I also used to collect ads, in the sense, which is why I guess I ended up in advertising. As a kid, I used to cut out ads from newspapers, especially from the international ones like Time, or there used to be whatever magazines that we could lay our hands on in those days. So I used to collect and keep ads. So this is 80s. I think we are talking about the 90s, right? The Pepsi ad and the changes. So advertising, what influenced me most in the long term were the print ads, which I used to collect. I used to collect print ads, and that later became a thing. But it never crossed my mind at that point of time that I would like to work in advertising. I could be, because it was beyond imagination that anybody can become a copywriter or an advertising person, because you don't live in that world. I mean, I didn't live in that world because it was more of a working class thing where or a little above that, where you didn't think of these as jobs at that point of time, and that somebody actually wrote ads like that. So you heard about Alec Padamse and all those things in the newspaper clippings, but you didn't connect it with you being working in one of those agencies someday in Bombay. So you didn't think about that. Yeah. So the advertising was very different. It was slow. Also, it was see, like, it's more about the attention, in the sense, earlier in those days you do an ad, and that is what killed advertising also, which is like you could target the whole of India by putting an ad on Doordarshan or on All India Radio, and even hyperlocal ads. It was there, and it was well distributed, in the sense you had newspapers, you had radio, you had posters, cinema, lots of things to do. The business of advertising was much more, sad to say, more democratized from the in not democratized. It was more easy to target. Now it is now the problem. The thing is, the attention, our attention has changed, because the ads that I see or the things that I see is not what you see, because of targeting and sheer size of the economy and the ecosystem. So now, if you have to have a pan India product, or even something like, recently Reliance has had this brought this brand called Campa back to life. So Campa was Campa Cola, which died when Pepsi came back. It was just a short-lived stopgap arrangement when Coke and Pepsi were there. See, like, and if you think about it, if they want to become, if Campa has to become another Pepsi with that kind of a reach, they are not doing it through advertising. Their advertising is not like a Pepsi advertising or something like that. Campa is, even if it is growing, it's only because of the sheer power of their marketing network on ground and places like that. And you don't see any iconic Campa ad or something. In fact, they do bad ads. It doesn't, and even if they do good ads, it's going to be very difficult to reach out to all kinds of people. They might probably have to use influencers and podcasters to reach more people, in the sense. So it's like, I think advertising is basically, it's about the attention, where our attention is, and that has changed. And because of that, the advertising has changed. And also, when you are reading magazines, you would read ads that were in print. Now that you're on social media, you see reels or equivalent. That's not to say that we don't read anymore. I think we read more than ever, but in bits and pieces and not immersive. So, so I think advertising then and now is dictated by our behavioral habits as consumer, rather than, and we in ad agencies, all our money goes to Meta and Google, and probably to now you have these e-commerce sites who have their own platforms where you pay directly to them, Amazon and Blinkit and all these people. So there is no scope for too much of creativity over there. So that's what I think has kind of changed. I would not say destroyed, but changed the advertising industry. The form has changed, and the creativity that we were used to it in the 80s has gone for a toss.
I'm also curious, Gopal, like, what did you study at university? And because you say advertising was such a left of field career option, now it's probably become one of the more trendier options people may want to get into. At least in the 2010s when I was at university, getting into advertising and journalism was considered like this creative sort of left field option. Everyone that didn't do chartered accountancy, and they were sort of lost in like these different worlds, sort of went. And we had this course in the Mumbai University system called the Bachelor of Mass Media, that in your third year your specialization was either advertising or journalism. So that was the course that I opted for some time. And it was where all the creatives sort of just jumped in, that were not like going in like the arts in any specific sort of direction. But what did you study at university, and what was your initial plan for like a long term career, and how did you end up in Bombay? pursuing advertising?
Okay, so I was lost in the sense I was actually a decent student until say 10th standard in the sense or what is called SSLC in Karnataka. I was probably like I used to like score without too much of trouble, and then I wanted to actually study history or something related to that, but it was something that my father would never. I mean, you can do whatever you want after you do your 12th kind of thing. So I took up science for 11th and 12th, and that was a big mistake because I don't know about you or others, but there's this wall that you hit when it comes to understanding mathematics and concepts and stuff like that. And when you're an adolescent, so there are other things that hits you, and that was 11th and 12th was a disaster for me. So luckily for me, I wrote an entrance in after 12th. At that point of time, which was considered something different, which was hotel management. So there is this all India test for the group, like you have the Dadar Catering College in Bombay, the IHMs. So for that, so I wrote that entrance. That was what I wrote, and I wrote it, and I got it. So just because wrote an entrance and got it, then my father didn't was. I mean, my parents were okay with it, and also I wanted to do something different. Though I had zero interest in anything related to hotel industry, but it was a good escape from engineering and or related any other thing. So I thought may as well do that, which was quite interesting thing. And I was a very good student there for about a year. After which I went to the industry, and again that was actually when I look back, it was a different age. Hotel management those days was not the hotel management of today. It was more like a uh, like if you know where it leads to at that age, if you have a worldview about where the food is going or how important food is. I come from a background where you hardly ever ate out except for idli, dosa, or and biryani or something like that from one of these restaurants. You didn't know about fine dining. I mean, you couldn't even afford to go to any of the five-star hotels, and you didn't know about there was no Anthony Bourdain's books in India at that point of time. Which if I had read, I would have probably continued with hotel management or found a better things. So I did that, and then I was lost for several years because I had no interest. In fact, I even worked in hotels, but that was a disaster because I didn't enjoy it. And then finally, actually, what saved me was the internet. And why? Because this was all pre-internet age, and then internet came. And when internet came, one of the first things I did was actually start a magazine online. In one of these, you had these sites like GeoCities and Tripod and different sites, which is the equivalent of blogging today. But then it was called websites. There was no blogs. I mean, blogs came in the early noughties. So this was before that. So I started a magazine called the Bangalore Torpedo, and so the Bangalore Torpedo was basically satire. It was I didn't know about Onion, but it was like the Onion. So I used to write funny things about things. And this was in the second half of the 90s, say 97, 98, around that time. And it was great. I mean, the writing was fun. I used to put up stuff like what I do now, blogging, but then I didn't have a camera, so I had to play around with words and to write funny stuff. It made me a lot of friends around the world because in those days there were very few Indian websites, and anybody who's coming to Bangalore as a tourist would search for Bangalore and they would land up on my page, and then they would write to me, and then I would end up meeting them in Bangalore. So I made a lot of international friends, a lot of friends. People came and stayed over with me. Many of them who are still friends around the world, and that was good fun. So, like, what is the beauty of internet is that you can publish, and I think I discovered that without theorizing all those things. It was just fun in those days, and I did that. And that was then when one of my friends who had classmates who was a little more who knew the world a little more and who had actually gone to after his graduation had gone to NID. His name is Srikanth Vellore, and he saw my magazine and he told what are you, and I used to work my father like at a factory that used to make fiberglass products at that time as an doing different things. It was not even related to hotel management. And he told me, what are you doing with these things when you can write? Why don't you go and approach an ad agency and and try becoming a copywriter? They might hire you. And so that is how he told me, and he gave me a contact of an advertising agency called Marich in Bangalore. So Marich is actually an agency founded by a person named Ranjan Ghoshal, who used to be a rock star in the 70s in Calcutta. So he used to have but he had an ad agency in Bangalore at that moment. He saw my work and he hired me he gave me a copy test and stuff like that. So which is one of the things about advertising. Anybody who wants to become a copywriter, or you just go to an ad agency and tell them you want to be a copywriter. At least in those days, in fact, you can still do it, and you do a copy test test and if you show some writing of yours, you will get a job. And then it's like the film industry. You have to prove at your work, and then after that you can. I mean, I continued advertising for so many years, so it's been at one cold knock at one place, and then your career is made. So, but then that's a culmination of a lot of other interests and stuff like that. And advertising was fun because I loved advertising, and also it's a good job because somebody like me who didn't know what to do in life, in advertising you work on different products. Like for example, one day you'll be working on software, next day you'll be selling uh, burgers. I mean, you're working on multiple things all the time, and if you like, if you you do so many different things. It's like you discussing different topics and podcasts. I mean, every time you meet a person, it opens up a new window, a new world. So how, like, marketing in real estate is very different from selling soft drinks, for example. You learn such a lot, and it all comes down to understanding people, how people consume things, how people sell things, the market. I mean, and then of course there's a communication and writing part which comes after that. So it's a fascinating world by itself, which is advertising, which is not very different from writing in some ways, except that writing is more intense and more focused on something. Advertising allows you to just jump from one thing to another all the time, which is a beautiful thing for some. I can't imagine myself being an accountant all my life, or selling or making fiberglass products. Might be I would have learned to love it or something, but not. But this was good fun in the sense, and it's continued for so long. And photography came much later. I mean, these were times when I never used to photograph. Photography came only after I started working with art directors and advertising agency and seeing them shoot pictures. And then that happened. That was a different journey. That was parallel to my advertising journey.
Yeah, like what I'm seeing is like, because as someone that's worked in education myself, right, Gopal, I'm so like intrigued by how you didn't have any specific training related to writing copy or becoming an advertising professional, right? In a way, would you like that magazine and your writing related to, living in Bangalore at that point of time was sort of your training ground to, become, and it was so self-taught in that sense, right? And I think maybe the internet was sort of an enabler in that sense, in creating this community beyond your immediate local sort of environment. And I just love that story of how you went into that ad agency and showed them the copy test and you got the job, and now it's like, oh, it's been your career for so long. It's so, I don't know, I find that so fascinating because sometimes, like when you're younger and you put so much thought into planning out your entire career, it was also quite nice to hear that you were lost at that point. Maybe sometimes we put so much pressure on yourself for the first career to be your entire lifetime. And when you're in that age in your 20s, you don't realize that life is much longer than these years. So you feel like if you fail in this career, then there's nothing else for you. But the fact that you were also trying different things and then eventually were open to, but you were also working on projects while you were trying these different things. So for someone listening to this that's also thinking about those pathways, I think one thing that we can pick up from your journey, Gopal, is to just keep building things and building projects and using the internet to sort of put your work out there, whether it's photographs, writing, or whatever creative sort of output you sort of have. Now, one thing you mentioned briefly was how while you were in advertising, you were taking photographs for these art directors. Now, you also told me that till 2009 in your bio, you had this blog called Which Main What Cross. And at this time, you had already moved to Bombay, right? You had moved to Bombay in like the 2000s. So, can you tell me the timeline of Which Main What Cross and Mumbai Paused? And, maybe we can talk about just the thinking behind both these projects and how, because right now I'm looking at Mumbai Paused Instagram and your blogspot, your blogger blog, 13,000 photos. So I really think that Mumbai Paused is like a historical archive of Mumbai at a very important time. And I think it is a very important collection of photographs of the city changing. And now that I have seen so much of your work, Gopal, that's what I have come to appreciate in terms of, I think it's very important to capture a city at a particular point of time. That's what your sort of project is sort of contributing to. So can you just tell me like a timeline of which main what cross and Mumbai paused as well?
Okay, so one correction. I didn't take photographs for art directors. I observe them. In the sense, I work with them. So I mean, we get photographers to shoot our ads and stuff like that. But I mean, in an ad agency. But since they have training in art school and in everything, I learned through them. In the sense, they were my teachers in say how to compose images and how to colors and framing and stuff like that. It was all thanks to them. In the sense, so they were my teachers. My colleagues were my teachers. So that is one. So the timeline is, so I came to Bombay in 2000. I started advertising before that in Bangalore. My first job was in Bangalore. Then sometime in 2000, I took a train to Bangalore, from Bangalore to Bombay. I landed up here. Luckily, I realized that I had a couple of friends in Bombay who were in advertising. So I actually contact them on internet, and they asked me, where are you working? And I told them, what are you doing now? And I'm working in advertising in Bangalore. They told, well, what are you doing there? Come to Bombay. This is where all the fun is. This is where we do the best ads. So you just come over. You'll get a job, no problem. And here they were right. I landed here. And in fact, one of them, I stayed with one of them, and I stayed with him for exactly 3 days because I got a job as soon as I landed. Because one, I had a little work to show, and when you're a starter, it's quite easy to, at least in advertising in those days, like you open midday and look for a copywriter wanted ad, and you go and I was lucky, I guess, also, but I got a job. So I was here until 2005, 2006. That was my first innings in Bombay, where I worked in different agencies, including an agency called AB&U and then an agency called Leo Burnett. So then my mother fell ill. She had cancer. And so I had to be with her for some time. And then I'd gotten married in Bombay too by then. And then I moved to Bangalore while she was ill, and I was there till 2009 when I moved back. Which meant what cross happened in around 2005, 2006 when I was in Bangalore, when I landed up in Bangalore. And I got my first digital camera, which is this is all enabled by digital cameras, whatever I do. And that started in Bombay just before I went to Bangalore, because my wife, she had gone to work out of India, and when she came back, she gifted me a camera, a digital camera, which I think was a biggest mistake for her, because that took me on a different path altogether in some ways. Which is at that point of time, I have one more interest, which is trains, and I love trains because I mean, I think I have everything. Like trains is the internet of a different age. Uh, so I wanted to shoot trains, and then I realized that there are more interesting things outside of railway stations. So I started shooting in Bombay, but I used to post only on Flickr at that point of time. And then there was a site. I think it's still around, Flickr. And then when I moved to Bangalore, what used to happen was I had this camera which I was not using as often, because in Bombay you use a public transport. In Bangalore I was going to work on a bike, and that makes a huge difference. So, and I was not using my camera as much. So what I decided was to put the camera in my pocket while I go to work on my scooter and shoot pictures on the way every day. So I started doing that, and say after a month, I realized that I have a lot of images of Bangalore city, and and these are places that I grew up in, and different places, parts of the town that I took shortcuts to work. My office was in Indranagar, and I used to live near Makery Circle or Hebbal, which is on the other end of the city in those days. And now it's in the middle. Both are in the middle of the city. And then on the way, I used to take all the bylanes of the through to kind of get interesting pictures, as well as to avoid traffic, because the main roads are clogged. And these images, what would I do with them? I had no clue, because Flickr, I had too many images, and that's when blogging had actually taken off. And I also had blogs before, but were they're not photography. I thought, why not start a photography blog? And that's how Which Main What Cross came about, and I started posting pictures every day. And then when I moved back to in Bombay 9, I couldn't do Which Main What Cross anymore. So I started Mumbai Paused, and I continued my habit of posting pictures every day online. And that's how Mumbai Post was born as a blog. And then in 2011 or 10, whenever Instagram became open for Instagram Kill, that's when I created the Instagram account. And I was one of the earlier adopters of Instagram, because photographers were the first to use it. And I think I have followers just because I was one of the earliest there, and because I had the name Mumbai on it. And then what happens is, whenever somebody writes about Instagram, they put a few handles, and this used to come up on the Google search, and then I got followers there. So, which explains the number of followers at the initial stage. But yeah, so that's the timeline. Photography from Bangalore 2005 to 2009, 2009 to now, it has been Mumbai all through.
Yeah, like, like I've spent a considerable amount of time, seeing your photographs over time, right? You have such a huge collection from the early 2010s leading up to now. It's like more than a decade, like, 15 plus years, Gopal. So, like, I've also had this conversation with Uday, who's another friend who was also on the podcast. I'm really curious about how do you find your voice as a photographer? Because I'm looking at some of your photographs, there are political undertones, there are social messages. You're also, I think now, because you also use Substack quite actively, you have extended essays along with your photographs, which I feel like is a really nice mix of two of your core sort of passions of writing and photography. So it's really enjoyable to read the thoughts behind your photographs, because for a long time, I think Instagram is primarily visual led, but Substack seems to combine the best of, both those worlds. So, like, did you know very early on that these are the kinds of photographs you want to capture? Or did this thematic sort of understanding come up later in that sort of journey? And like, how do you know? Like, is there like a conscious thinking about, so these are the kinds of photos I want to click when I go out at a particular point of time? These are the kinds of photos I want to click in this time of the year? Or is it more haphazard and chaotic than that?
Actually, it is quite haphazard and not chaotic. It is one is like you said in the introduction, it's about habit. So to sustain something, a hobby like this for a long time, you have to make it a habit. That is, or any hobby for that matter. It's a habit that you enjoy or something that you enjoy doing that you make it into a structured habit. So it's not chaotic, but it is not, but it's not haphazard, but it's a concept. But finding a voice is something uh, that comes once you take a lot of pictures. Like for example, they say it's 10,000 pictures or whatever, but it usually comes from there. In the sense, like I said, I thought I'll shoot pictures of trains and railways, but what happened was it was the places and the cities that dictated my journey and or my voice. And I think so. Bangalore has its own kind of stuff. And how I developed that is basically, I think it is like I said, I like I'm in to gather information. In the sense, starting with the magazines when I was a kid to kind of listening to shortwave radio or news. I mean, addicted to news in some ways. It's all seeking knowledge in the sense, not knowledge. It's about seeking information. Not, I wouldn't call it knowledge. It was more about different things. So I like trivia. I used to also me and my friends in school. We used to take part in quiz competitions. We never used to win a lot, but at least we were part of that thing where you are hungry for trivia, for that matter. The sense. So I think that is where the foundation for the voice comes from. And so when I used to shoot Bangalore, which is where I found the voice, is one, it was which main what was. So one thing was clear, it was about the city. And then I realized that I really love the city. And in the initial days, from an education point of view, from what you do, I got a camera. Now, when you get a camera, you shoot a lot of different things. You shoot portraits, you shoot landscape, you can do wildlife. I mean, there are hundreds of ways to, I mean, ways a camera can lead you in different paths. And in my case, I think it was my love for the city and people, and also my work in advertising about consumer habits and stuff like that, which directed me towards what is happening on the streets. And then it became the streets dictating that, because what I realized, and which made podcast was surprisingly quite popular in a very in among a subset of people who are journalists, and journalists who used to cover Bangalore and regional news. The people used to write in Kannada, the newspapers, because the pictures that I shot were not from the popular places like Lalbagh or Kapan Park and the different popular things that were coming, but everyday things like markets and art and people selling things which they know they cannot write about, because it's a daily ordinary things and stuff like a poster or very basic things that you notice every day, that they notice every day, that somebody is putting it online. And in those days, since mobile phones didn't have camera like they have now, nobody was doing it. Very few people were doing. Of course, there were others doing it. There were many photographers across the world doing it. But in Bangalore, I was among the few. And even if they're doing it, I was doing it as a blog that would come every day. And then you had Twitter and Facebook coming in a little later when I used to put pictures there, which went on to this. And so the voice came from the streets, and it is not. It was. I think I consciously avoid what is popular, also because the kind of photography I do is slowly developed into something which is about ordinary things and daily things, and converting that into stories, and not the big things. So you would not, like, for example, I would go for a Ganpati procession or immersion for that, but I would probably look the other way, and point my camera at the people, for example, or I would go before the event and look around for interesting things. So I think that is a conscious decision, in the sense of not going with the what people are doing. I don't do trends because I do that enough in advertising. In the sense, I don't have to go for popular things, and this is my space. And in advertising, I have to do what the client wants and the product wants, and I have very little. I mean, there are lots of, you work in a team, and that's a teamwork thing and stuff. Whereas here, I can do everything on my own, and this is my space. It's my voice. It's what I see, and everything I put out is me thinking aloud in some ways, and me talking about things. And and it's also about, I make a lot of mistakes uh, while uh, while posting, in the sense, when I write about stuff, because I don't know enough about a place. And then, since I'm going back again and again, I realize what those mistakes are, and then I correct it, or I update my knowledge. Like, when I began shooting pictures, I used to be, I think my voice was very authoritative. I say this is like the best something, or this is so wonderful and stuff. It used to be like kind of how people do reels now. I still do some when it comes to food and stuff like that, but when I find a good eating joint, but I avoid that. And it became more about the subtler things and noticing. And I think it is still the gathering of information, and marking the passage of time through different little things, which I would love to go back and do in the 80s if given that. I mean, it's impossible, but if I try to do that now, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating journey, and it's completely self-indulgent.
Yeah, I feel like, maybe 20, 30 years down the line, Gopal, someone will talk about the 2010s and 2020s, and then maybe your blog will pop up, as an archive of this time, and then someone from that time will be doing their own sort of project. So I feel like I love how you're able to look at both these worlds differently, like you have your professional world as an advertising professional where you have those rigid structures, but in this particular space you can be more creative and be in the moment and really create stuff that the moment is also sort of giving to you, and not constantly be driven by sort of a larger agenda. And I definitely see that in your photos, because some of your photos, you capture things in motion, you capture life, and you also see a lot of railway stations even now in your photography. I have
Yeah,
noticed in Bombay at least, a lot of your photos, some of them are around markets at the station, some of them are around people. Because in a city like Mumbai, the stations for the longest time were the hub. It's, do you stay on the eastern side of the station? Like, this is a very Bombay specific thing. Do you
yeah,
stay on the central railway? Do you stay on the western railway? Do you stay on the harbor line? And then people sort of develop this judgment of you, or they develop, it's sort of like an identity marker, in, I think, in a negative connotation. But it also, like, when we speak for directions, or where do you stay, like, this is a very Bombay specific lingo. So you stay in Andheri east or west. So for someone from the
yeah,
outside, they'll be like, east or west of what? East or west of the station,
yeah, yeah.
which is
Correct.
very, very like a Bombay thing. So that's something that's hard to communicate through, like, explain to someone that lives in a city where for instance, Bangalore, like, the railways are not such a big sort of junction. And
Yeah,
I think in Bangalore, goes back to your blog, it's the mains and cross, right? As
yeah.
you said, like all the streets, which is what the name of your blog was. So, Gopal, like, what I wanted to do is, if we could look through some of your photographs, I'll actually first bring up your Instagram page to give the viewers just the idea of what your work is like. And then we can look at maybe 4 or 5 photographs from your drive. Again, what I will be doing is linking Gopal's digital archives in the show notes, whether it's his Substack page, his blog, his Instagram account. I think you can spend days and weeks just lost in his archives. So, firstly, here is right. So, this is Gopal's Instagram page. So, he is at Mumbai Paused, and as you can see, he's been doing this, probably one of the earliest photographers on the platform. And there's lots of photos, and again, if you look into the photographs, there are captions and stories. And then he's also got this wonderful Substack, which you can also find through his the links on his Instagram account. So I'm just going to stop sharing this. And Gopal, maybe we can talk about, we discussed maybe talking about some of your photographs. So if you can share your
Yeah.
screen, and maybe we can briefly talk about the story behind these photographs, because a lot of young photographers may be listening to this and they'd just be
Mm.
curious to see how you think about creating a photo. What is the creative process in your mind as a photographer as well? So I'll just hand it over to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So basically, I have about so you said five pictures, and I have like thousands of pictures. So it was very difficult to choose five pictures. So I put it in a format where I show my life journey. Like you said, the timeline. So I'll use that as a guide. So this is the first picture. This is from Bangalore, which main what cross, and this is from people reading. A newspaper in one of the reading stalls in a place called Cotton Pet in Bangalore. So there was a bomb blast somewhere in at that point of time. I'm not sure if it was in Bangalore or in Bombay. Something, nothing large, but something. So people were glued to the newspapers. So I'll start with which main what cross, and this was from Cotton Pet, which is the heart of Bangalore, the market area. So you think of it as our like the area around Paidani in Bombay. So it's something like that. And how did I shoot this picture? I was going by on my scooter, and I saw this and I stopped and I clicked the picture and I scooted. So that was my process in Bangalore. In Bangalore, it used to be on a two-wheeler, and I used to also walk. The two-wheeler allowed me to go faster. Also, it was on my way to work. A detour, but it was on my way to work. So this picture is from Bangalore. Yeah. So this is picture number one. So talking about processes of for budding photographers, I think over the years it's become walking has become my primary thing, followed by public transport, and so there is no alternative to being at any place to get a photograph. So you have to take your camera and get out and shoot. So that is and observe. Even if you don't shoot, at least for observing, spending time in different places and observing and looking at things and stories and people is where you get your stories from. And in my case, it is I'm looking for stories. Photographs come secondary. I'm looking for something that can tell a story, and in a story like this, you can interpret it in different ways depending on who you are as a viewer. From my point of view, this is about the habit of newspaper reading that is dying out. Second, it is about attention economy. It's also about culturally things. They're all Kannada newspapers, so I can look at it from a language point of view about a place. And so there are different ways of reading a photograph. And so, depending on the caption you give and the place you give, or if you make it a series, what kind of series you want to do, that will dictate the direction of the storytelling. So, the picture is there, the place is there, how you took it, I've told you, or how I took it, I've told you. So that's how the process of documentary photographing at least happens to most people. This is picture number one from Bangalore. So, this is picture number two from uh, Bombay or from Mumbai, and this picture is from the mall, Phoenix Mall in Kurla, from the basement, and you can see this the two benches, and then you see the TV written over there, and that TV was written most probably by a security person who works in the mall, who saw this scene of two benches and Ronald McDonald sitting over there and decided to put TV over there. So which proves that creativity and wit is for everybody. In the sense, if you think of I mean, it's such a wonderful idea. As an advertising person, this could have been, I mean, for or even it could have been a award-winning ad, for example. So this picture is from Mumbai. Actually, see, one more thing when it comes to my Instagram and Twitter is that I use a lot of hashtags. I mean, I use hashtags as a tool when it comes to photography, basically for documenting. So since Twitter, I mean, started with hashtags, and then with Instagram, it is also a great way for you to catalog your work, especially when you have a lot of pictures. So I had actually used a hashtag called "Plastic People and Their Universe," which is a thing I used to look at how we live today. So it's not necessarily about plastic; it's about how we live. So plastic people and a universe, and uh, and it's a name actually which is inspired by a Czechoslovakian Cold War era band called Plastic People and the Universe, which was very big in the 80s, and they're still there now. They still play now. Quite a good band. Uh, and so yeah, so that's from Bangalore. Sorry, from Bombay. And this is another picture from Bombay, which is about this is from Terminal One, which has closed down in Bombay. And I was waiting for somebody at the airport at the arrival, and I saw this scene. And I am sharing this image here, not just for the pictures, but also for what I think is the main theme of Mumbai Post throughout, starting from the beginning. This picture was shot sometime in 2009. So since then to now, I think my most if there is one theme that would define Mumbai Post, that would be workspaces and people working and work related, related stuff of all kinds, not just working class, all kinds of labor and related thing. Because like me, I think this city is where somebody comes to work, and life is. I mean, there's nothing much to talk about it, though we have quite an interesting life, all of us. But workspace Mumbai, which is a hashtag that I use, is something that since I had only 5 images to choose from, I thought I'll choose one about work that defines what Mumbai Post is, which was not such a big theme in Bangalore. This is from Malwani in Malad, and this was actually shot for the magazine called Tehelka, because there was this movie called Striker that had come out, which was shot in Malwani, and they were writing a story about this movie, and they wanted some pictures of the place where carom games happen. So I happened to go to Malwani and get into one of these dens where matches happened, and I shot this image over there. And that was interesting because in I had actually taken a year's break in 2011 to do photojournalism full time, which after a year I discontinued because of the way photojournalism was going as a career. I mean, as a business or a profession, as well as uh, the kind of when it becomes work, your photography isn't as exciting. So this is one of the pictures that I shot while I was doing that. So it's also part of my photography journey. And this image was shot in Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu, where I had gone with the journalist Rohini Mohan, and so we were in. There was this event or an ongoing event in the Park Straits where the Sri Lankan Navy shoot at Indian fishermen who fish in their waters. So it's a complicated environmental story, which nobody reports as environmental, but they do it as a political story because it's the international border. But technically, or if you look at it from the lens of or from my lens, it's actually a environmental story because the on the Indian side we overfish and we have a lot of structural issues with fishing in that part of or all over India, and the fish catch on the Indian side is very bad. So the fishermen from India are forced to fish in waters in Sri Lanka where trawlers are prohibited. So they have tried to protect their fish through methods, but as we continue to trawl, and so they end up in the fishing waters there, which leads to the Sri Lankans shooting at Indian fishermen. There are other stories to it. There are political angles to it, which I think is secondary. And but while I was there, I met some. We saw. I mean, me and Rohini, we saw fishermen from Sri Lanka who were captured, who were arrested by the Indian Coast Guard and stationed there because of the tensions. And and we met like tens of fishermen from India and a few from Sri Lanka, and it was quite very different the way they presented themselves. Like for example, you can see that the two Sri Lankans had tattoo, whereas a lot of Indians had wounds. Like the one guy had a bullet wound that you can see on the screen here. Many people had broken thumbs and broken parts of the body. They had surgical marks of bullet removal and stuff like that. So there's a stark contrast. So this was not published like this, but I shot for myself a story where I had Lankans with tattoos and Indians with their wounds. So it was actually one of the happiest years of my life doing photojournalism, but unfortunately, I couldn't continue with it as a profession. And then this is a story from Bangalore, which I did for about horses, and so because Bangalore still has a lot of horse-drawn, or used to have horse-drawn carriages, a few still remain. So I had done a series on that, and then this picture is from Govandi in M Ward in Mumbai, which is on the harbor line, and this was on a rainy day and how people there live. So I do a lot of pictures. I tried not to make it poverty porn, but I tried to tell a story of how we live. And so this is a story of one of the places where they cross the the seasonal stream like this. Luckily, since this photo was taken, we now have a bridge at this place, so they don't have to cross this place like this. But it used to be a really dangerous place to live, and still probably is. And then the final picture is something that I shot for advertising. So this is one of the few pictures that I shot for advertising, and this was for the agency I used to work for earlier, which is called Leo Burnett, and this was for Tide, and this image was shot in Warsaw. So, what I do, I was noticed by some old colleagues of mine, and they asked me to shoot this campaign. So this is one last image that I would like to share from which is relevant to what I do on away from work.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great collection. I think I can't imagine how hard condensing, 15 years of work. Again, I feel like any cross section of photographs you take from your collection would be like sort of interesting to discuss because it'll have its own backstory, right? But like as you were discussing each photograph, I realized that there are so many layers to these photographs. You can look at it from a sociological lens, a psychological lens, an economic lens. Like even the last photograph with the Tide ad, like the campaign ad, I was just thinking like that has such an, for instance, from a capitalistic perspective, you can critique that photograph and say that you're selling a photograph when you're selling like a detergent when the person is sort of sleeping in sort of the place that he's working, right? But you can also say that there are so many needs that people have, and having clean clothes is something that no matter where you are in life is a primary need, right? But
Correct.
and that is just because someone has a particular job, you're saying they can't have clean clothes. That's just a bias that you have as a viewer, right? And like that's like an immediate thought that I got in that. And then when I was looking at the photograph of the two McDonald people looking at the wall, and you said that can be an advertising. It'll be such a genius advertising campaign if KFC
Correct.
put up an ad there. If or like a Burger King put up an ad there and someone took a photo and put it on social media. I and also like what when you mentioned that that was the class, or I mean the mill area, right? And it's so
No, this
interesting.
is Phoenix Mills. It was a mall. It was the
Correct.
mall, but which used to be a mill.
Correct. So I mean, like in a historical context, the fact that you took that photograph there speaks so much about change because the mill area was the primary economic hub, right? And
Yeah.
now that you see two Ronald McDonald's, which is this symbol of, Western capitalism, just looking at an empty wall. I mean, what does it say about changing times, right? That maybe that TV can represent what the mill area sort of stood for a previous decade. And now you have this sort of modern version of, now many people walk into that mall, and sometimes for people that didn't grow up in the 80s, we don't even realize what an important sort of hub of economic activity for Bombay this area was. Now we only look at it as a, fancy mall area. And a lot of people don't even go to that mall because they only have high end shops. It's not even a mall
Yeah.
that everyone can afford, because it's one of the higher end sort of malls, which is so like such a different time to what it actually was in the 80s and 90s, and even like that photograph you spoke about, the people working at the Terminal 1 with the now defunct Terminal 1, like it got me thinking about the name of your blog and your project, Gopal, Mumbai Paused, right? And I think you
Yeah.
mentioned this in the conversation you had with Utsav and Chuck as well, because this is like a juxtaposition. Whenever anyone thinks of Mumbai, they never say pause, because in Mumbai, anyone from Mumbai knows that if you pause somewhere in like a busy area, someone will push you and take you with them. Especially if this is like a very Mumbai local reference. Like if you're standing on the local train at around 6 or 7 o'clock, if you stand and you don't move, someone will take you to another another part of
Another station.
another part of town, especially like the Virar local or some of these other things. So you can't be pausing there at all, right? You always have. So for me, whenever I think of Mumbai, I will always think moving. So like I think
Oh my God.
what your photographs sort of say is that even though there is so much activity, sometimes it's sort of important to pause and observe the multitudes of life happening in this city, right? The different kinds of professions, different kinds of lives, different kinds of economic strata, different kinds of it's so interesting that Mumbai has this juxtaposition of the richest person in the country with the largest house and the most expensive house, and very close by to that there could be like a large one of the largest slums in the country as well, and
Yeah.
which is like unfortunate, and it's just the reality of this city as well, the darker side that sometimes it's very easy to unsee, and it's and I think your photographs throw light on some of these juxtapositions in this
Yes.
city that we call, and I think after staying here for 10 years, like I've realized that it's easy for people that live here to sometimes look at the positive, and like for instance, even though Mumbai is supposed to be like this, city of dreams, we don't have walkable footpaths. We struggle with good infrastructure. We struggle with good roads. There's a traffic
Air
situation.
to breathe.
I mean, that's one of the biggest concerns, right? Like you have rent that is like
Yeah.
extravagant, but we don't have good air to breathe and good roads to walk on, which is like a basic necessity in any big metro, right? And so there are two sides to this miracle. Maybe it is the cultural and financial capital, but it's also got so many problems that is still needing urgent attention. We can see that in your photographs as well, Gopal, like that changing landscape of this city. So thank you for that work and the amount of time you're putting into that, Gopal. But to
Thank
conclude
you.
this conversation, Gopal, and just to respect time, I know you're someone that reads in a variety of different disciplines, and you're also someone that consumes a lot of media, whether it's films or podcasts. So I'm just curious, like, if you had some recommendations for maybe we can focus on from a photography context, or you can keep it open ended. Something that you've read recently that really moved you. It could be fiction or non-fiction. It doesn't have to be the best, just something you've read, or maybe a movie or podcast series that you've been listening to that you feel enhances or brings you a lot of joy. And we can conclude on that note. So
Okay.
maybe
It's a tough question.
a
Yeah.
book, a film, and a podcast that moved you recently. It's not the best, but just something you've enjoyed recently?
Okay. Not very recent, but a book that comes to my mind in relation to what we talked now is there's this book by Shanta Gokhale called Crowfall, which I genuinely really loved reading because I like her way of storytelling. It's that very Indian kind of storytelling. I guess she wrote it in Marathi first, but there is this kind of storytelling that is very that flows so beautifully in Marathi and Kannada, which actually share some similarities, that style of writing. Of course, I read the translation in English, but I thought that was very good because of what she talks about, how she talks about the city in the background. It's definitely not I mean, a Bombay or a Mumbai book, but it has so much of the city and stories about the city in it, and it's not just Bombay, South Bombay or Dadar or any of those places. It's about Palghar and the new Bombay, in the sense the greater Bombay region and how it was. So I really loved that. That was a very interesting book that moved me. It's like photographing that book in the past. So that was good. Then podcast is really difficult because I listen to so many of them. Uh, I like there is this podcast called Past, Present, and Future. I can't pronounce the name of the guy who was it. It's a British one that talks about a little about philosophy and uh, books and culture and economics. It goes into different questions, little deep, but I kind of like that podcast. And then there are, I mean, I just can't recall. There are so many that I just I don't want to pick up the phone and look. So I'll stick to this one. Then movie. Movie is, there was this, I don't know, it was called The Perfect Day or something. There was this Japanese movie about this guy who goes around cleaning.
Yeah, Perfect
It was on
Days.
movie.
Yeah, Perfect Days. The one
The
by
Perfect Day.
Vendors, right? Wim Wenders, right?
No,
It's the
this is a
one. Yeah,
Japanese film.
it's the guy that the toilet cleaner that lives in Japan
Yeah,
that
correct,
find
correct, correct.
every
Yeah, yeah.
evening he reads his book and he has this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Perfect
I
Days.
watched it
Perfect.
perfect days, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was some time back, but that movie still kind of resonates a lot. So I really like it. I watch a lot of Japanese movies and shows, but I mean, I didn't know who directed this movie, so but yeah, the I like that kind of storytelling. So that movie was nice, and the mood was really nice. That was, I think, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I guess there are many other movies that or books or podcasts, but yeah, if I have to recall, these three came first to me.
Thanks, Gopal. And I just wanted to get your recommendations on some contemporary photographers whose work inspires you, like city-based photographers. And I know like some contemporaries of yours, like Uday or Chirodeep, who I think you've spoken about previously as well. But just to, cross-reference other city-based photographers that come to your mind right now. I mean, there must be so many that you've crossed paths with, but something
Mhm.
you'd recommend now.
Yeah. See, actually, I mean, I walk around with the names you mentioned, Uday, Chirodeep. These are uh, two of them with whom I've actually spent weekends walking around the city or going to different places and shooting. I've done it quite a few times. So, and also Chirodeep was the photo editor at Time Out, and I've shot for him. So I met him there first. And so he's been a kind of mentor in some ways. And of course, he shot Mumbai like no one else. So I would definitely recommend their names. Uday, you can also listen to his podcast. Very interesting story. And of course, Chirodeep, I think you should call him. So there are several like that. So I would recommend. See, there are like if you follow Chirodeep, you'll get some 10 recommendation of good photographers. I will stick to my friends. For example, there is Aslam who shoots rivers of Mumbai and tribal stories. Then there is Ritesh, who shoots Bombay in his own style, and he makes Ritesh Uttam Chandani, the photo wala. He makes books also. So as a what do you call an internet person, there's no better place than internet to or from the your Instagram, for example, to get to know what people are shooting in real time and posting old pictures. So there are so many Indian photographers. There is Harsha Vadlamani, who's in Hyderabad, who I think everybody should follow. Then there is from Maharashtra, my favorite mood or so nobody shoots Konkan like Indrajit Kambe. So So he's very good. Then there is I forget the second name. I can't pronounce it. I can't get it. Abhay from Pune, who has his own style. Also, more than photography, I also look at a lot of artists and other people. I think they are also as important as photographers to get a lot of things. Then there are so many women photographers who are so much more better than all the men. I mean, they bring their own perspective. I mean, better because the kind of perspectives they bring, because we don't have that kind of lived experience. There are lots of women photographers out there, starting with Anushri Fadnavis, who used to shoot in Bombay and now shoots for Reuters. And I would recommend looking at work of from a Bombay thing. If you are into nostalgia, Suni Tarapurwala's pictures from old, they age like gold. In the sense, it's like too good. So a good inspiration to go back to and see. Then there is, I think Gauri Gill is somebody I like because. And which I would recommend for photographers to look at, because the way she presents her work, the kind of setting up she does, and the stuff like that. I mean, it might be for a Western audience, probably. I don't know. It's not a daily thing. It's for a different audience. But the way she tells stories and how she takes ideas and brings them alive, I think is very good to look at and learn. And from there, once you get into that rabbit hole of looking at these people, I think it'll lead you to many other people. Look at a mix of people who do daily things like Chirodeep and Dinesh Khanna, so many people out there. Or Aslam, who's a dear friend, and me, of course. And then I would look at people who actually are very good in presenting the photographs in new ways. Like, for example, Gauri Gill, which I mentioned, or Dayanita Singh does stories where she has this moving gallery kind of things. So I would, if and look for women photographers. I can't recall all the names right now, but I think there are a lot of interesting work being done by women, because it's so difficult to shoot Indian cities and stuff, and the women are doing a better job. So they must be really, really good. So I think that way I would. So these are my recommendation, and also people who are presenting works like Ritesh does books. People who does books try and buy as many books as possible from different people if they are making photo books, not because of to support them or anything, mainly to see how stories are told. And you don't have to restrict. I'm restricting myself to names from India, but I think as a country we are going looking inwards more and more, and even the internet and everywhere. I think we are going the wrong way. So I mean, wrong way from a from intellectual growth point of view. Since we have the internet, it is also a note to self that to look at more work from around the world and see what people are doing around the world in photography and in storytelling, which I think people who get to travel outside, nothing like it. When you travel, you get a lot of influences, visit bookshops and stuff like that. But you can always look at work that is happening around the world and then learn or try to get inspired by the kind of storytelling. But then the stories will come from the streets, like I mentioned earlier. So have fun.
Yeah, and like I recently went for a meal by Go Hallu Gopal, the one that they organized in Bandra with Thelma.
Elma. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was there for that meal, and I know that's something that's very close to your heart, Gopal. So, briefly, if you can tell me about, Go Alu, and I know you run, like, you're part of that with Aslam and Minaz. So, what was that about?
Okay, so Go Hallu Hallu came sometime in 2018, I think, around that time. Me and Aslam was doing Rivers of Mumbai project, and I was doing Mumbai Paused as usual. So we thought that we should introduce people of Mumbai to the other side of Mumbai. So, like you said, Telma's house, which is actually East Indian village, right in the heart of Bandra, which is right there near Salman Khan's house, and it's a world in itself. It is so vibrant and colorful, and food and all those kind of the different. So we used to encounter all these beautiful things in inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park, or in Koli villages, or in East Indian villages in other parts of the city, markets and stuff like that, which we thought we should share with people and do walks. Also, walks were in vogue, or were just picking up at that point of. You had other people like Khaki Tours and all those people starting off or becoming big at that point of time. So we thought even we should do that, and we should lead walks. Also from at that point of time, from a photography point of view. I mean, we thought it'll be more like photo walks. And then that's how Go Halulu started. And it means, like the name suggests, it's about slowing down. We wanted people in Bombay to slow down. So that is where the name came from. And then I got busy with work, but Aslam was a more energetic one. and he continues to do walks after walks, do occasional ones. He does most of the walks and every weekend. Also, we realize how little we knew when we started taking our walks. In the sense, we are basically photographers, and we are not, we don't live there. And it's like parachuting and shooting pictures, which doesn't sound really right. And that's when Aslam, who's a very good people's person, uh, had this idea that it should be the people over there who should lead the walks and it should be their walk. And Gohalu will be the facilitator or the aggregator of people and stuff like that. And so that it's the community that or the person or the house we go to or the place we go to that gets to tell their story. I mean, we can't tell a story for a tribal who lives inside a Warli tribe that lives inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Or Thelma's story is best said by Thelma and not by us. So that is in short the Gohalul. So we haven't scaled up like a khaki tours or something. It's not commercialized in that way. So it's more like more informal. So it retains that touch and that connect with the people who are leading the walks.
Yeah, and like a small shout out to I recently attended this amazing meal that was organized by Go Halu Halu, and Aslam and Minaz were a part of that, which were also Minaz was also on the podcast, and I got to listen to Thelma's story, who is an activist that still lives in the Chimbai area in Bandra, and it was just so inspiring to hear her story and hear it from her in her words, like how she stood up for her community. And I always walked by that path, but the association is always with the apartment building on the other side, but this was such a nice experience to see this side of that community. But on that note, we come to an end of this episode of learning stories. Gopal, thank you so much for making time, first of all.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, and I'm so grateful, for you for taking time on this Saturday. But I'm just a huge fan of your work as someone that's seen your photos and, spoken to you and met you over time. And I hope you continue to do this because I really think Mumbai Paused is an important historical archive for the city and for our residents. And I'm so glad I know you as a friend, but I'm always inspired by your passion and creativity with Mumbai Paused. And you'll always see me like in the comments. And I will be linking Gopal's projects, whether he's always moved across platforms. So you'll have to, I think Instagram's a great way to introduce yourself to his work, but I will be linking his other projects, whether it's Which Main, What Cross, Go Halu Halu, some of the recommendations, they'll all be in the show notes. So thank you, Gopal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.